the recorded portion, just stop your video. And now we're going to turn it over to Linda Sula, the illustrious co-chair of our committee.
Thanks, Lynn. Hi, everybody. Good morning. As Lynn mentioned, I'm Linda Sula, co-chair of the Climate Change Committee, along with Nancy. And as you know, we've had some fantastic news this week with President Biden signing the infrastructure bill. In it are included funds for a number of climate projects. It won't fix where we're at, but it sure is a great start for further down the line. And welcome to the last installment of our speaker series, Marin's Climate Report Card. We have some wonderful panelists joining us today. They represent 4 diverse communities, and we are anxious to see how their climate action plans are progressing. So let's just get right into it. Nancy?
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. So as Linda mentioned, this is the last of our climate change speaker series. And I just want to take a second to recap, how did we get to where we are today, where we're going to be talking about Marin's Climate Report Card. So if we go back a little ways, you might remember we started off with a high-level view about climate change, what causes it, impacts and threats. And we also brought in representatives from California League and the US League to talk to us about what the League's positions are that relate to climate change, because we all know it's about the positions, and what the League is doing nationally and statewide in addressing issues around climate change. Then in May, Alex Portashover joined us to talk about Drawdown Marin. This is the countywide program that has done a lot of work over the past few years outlining strategies that will be most effective here in Marin to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Marin. Then we brought in experts in their fields to talk to us about the 4 key climate change related threats to Marin, those being wildfires, droughts, sea level rise, and flooding. And as we know, addressing all these threats is not a small task. And how do you go about figuring that out? And where do you start? And how do you know if you're getting where you want to go? So Christine O'Rourke came in and spent a session explaining climate action plans. And this is how each town, city, and unincorporated Marin have gone about measuring their greenhouse gas emissions, and then setting goals and strategies on how to reduce those emissions, and then going back and revisiting to see how they've been doing and what they need to adjust to do better, etc. So we've talked a lot about what could be done, what might be done, but what actually is being done, and how are we doing in that regard? So today's presentation, Marin's Climate Report Card, is going to be a robust panel discussion focused on kind of boots on the ground actions, things that are really being done. We have 4 Marin jurisdictions joining us today to talk about what they're doing. So just understand, this is a snapshot. It doesn't represent the entire county. We'd be here all day if we had representatives from every jurisdiction, but it will give you an idea of the progress that's being made, and also some of the challenges that the towns and cities are facing in meeting those goals and what the realities are. So first, I want to introduce you to our panelists. And as I do, Lynn's going to highlight them. So you will see our five panelists on your screen for most of this presentation. So our moderator today is Bob Brown. And I like to call Bob the father of climate action plans in Marin. I met Bob in 2009. We were in a class together at College of Marin on sustainability when this was all brand new stuff. And Bob was director of community development for San Rafael at the time, and he wanted to write a climate action plan for San Rafael. And he did just that. And he also worked with many of the other jurisdictions in Marin to help them move along with their climate action plans. Ultimately, Bob went on to work for Novato as a community development director and as a sustainable development consultant. He is now retired. So thank you, Bob, for coming out of retirement to help us out today. I can't think of a better person to moderate this panel. So our panelists are all members of either the Climate Change Sustainability Committee Commission for their town. So David Cooper is a commissioner on the Sausalito Sustainability Commission. He is a managing member of West Coast Clean Tech, which is a clean tech fund. Sue Saunders is co-chair of the San Anselmo Climate Action Committee, leading the transportation and outreach projects. And she's a mom and educator and a frequent contributor to the IJ. Gretchen Schubeck is the sustainability coordinator for Novato. She has been a leader in the creation of community-based programs for both local governments and nonprofit sectors since 1995. And I just want to mention Novato and San Rafael are the only towns in Marin that have paid staff to do this, Gretchen being one of those paid staff. She's with Novato. Corey Bytoff, who is on staff in San Rafael, unfortunately is out of town this week. Otherwise, he also would be joining us today. And finally, we have Walt Vernon, who is chair of the Fairfax Climate Action Committee. He spends his days trying to make the world a better place by creating better environments. Thank you, Walt. So there are links to all of these committees and commissions in the chat if you want to check those out at a later time. And I'm now going to toss this over to Bob, and he is going to take over. So Bob, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
You're good? Okay. Boy, it is funny when we talk about ancient history and climate action planning being 2009. But, you know, it has been a really robust and active, decade and a half, and we've got a lot of work to do. But I'm really pleased to say now that every jurisdiction in Marin has their own climate action plan. And so, as we've said, today we're going to discuss what and how they're doing, and maybe some of the frustrations they're experiencing along the way. And again, this is a challenge of our lifetime that we're facing here. So just by way of background, there are many players locally here in the climate action field, and they're all critical players because we haven't seen a lot of leadership at the federal level, hopefully more coming. So really, it's been the state and the local level where things are really happening. And in Marin, we have, as mentioned, the 10 cities in the county. They work collaboratively in a group called the Marin Climate Energy Partnership. And that partnership also includes Marin Clean Energy and the Transportation Authority. So we try to wrap in, the critical issues of energy and transportation in responding to how the cities are going to address climate change. But there are also many nonprofits that are very important as well. Groups like Resilient Neighborhoods and Drive Clean Bay Area. So in this field, it really is taking a village to try to move the needle. So today we're going to focus on what 4 of our Marin cities are doing. I'll be posing 3 questions to our panel, and then we'll reserve time at the end for Q&A. And as was stated, you can write your questions in the chat as we go along. So let me ask our 4 panelists to briefly introduce themselves, how they came here today, and what they're doing in their communities. And then we'll get into the 3 questions. So David?
Sure, thank you. I sit on the Sausalito Sustainability Commission. It's an elected position. The city council is the main sort of vetting of the members. And I do live in Sausalito. I moved from Sonoma by way of San Francisco and spent almost 20 years in South Lake Tahoe, where I worked up in that community around its environmental and its sustainability and its sort of resilience against all the impacts of the water quality and the tourism and the trash and so forth. Sausalito is a great place to do the same. I have a background in renewable energy and clean tech investing, primarily in the venture model. So we back companies that are building business models around resilience and sustainability and regenerative methods of technology. And those are applicable in food and agriculture, which is my domain. Currently doing a lot of finance for early stage agricultural companies that are looking to build better food systems and use renewable energy and wastewater management and animal welfare as their primary mechanisms of change. So I look forward to hearing what we're going to cover today.
Thank you. Sue.
Well, hi, I'm Sue Saunders, and I'm the co-chair of the San Anselmo Climate Action Commission, a climate voter and campaigner, and a volunteer with Ride and Drive Clean, which was formerly Drive Clean Bay Area. And Ellie Cohen, a member of my commission, gave an update recently from Glasgow and said, quote, "Every decision we make matters because every time we put carbon in the atmosphere, it will be there for hundreds of years. I think about this with every choice I make. What we need to do is to get every resident, business, and government official thinking like Ellie." So the San Anselmo Climate Actions Commission primary goal is to work with the town council to achieve our emission reduction goals and mitigate the effects of climate change. And currently we have 7 priorities. One is a Clean Energy Community Resilience Center. Another is green transportation through the promotion of reducing driving and electric vehicle electrification, clean energy, clean green electric landscape equipment, building electrification, plastic and food waste reduction, public outreach and education, and evaluating new initiatives such as low carbon concrete, because we know concrete's 8% of all emissions. So anyway, it's a very committed group of individuals, including 2 high school interns. So thanks.
Thank you. All right, one of my favorite people, Gretchen.
Just let me unmute myself. Thanks for that, Bob. So, hi everyone. I was reflecting on the start of my journey with sustainability, and it actually started when I was in high school, living in Mendocino. I was asked to testify at a Department of the Interior hearing about proposed offshore oil drilling along the Mendocino coast, which was way back when. So, but this experience really did ignite a lifelong passion for me for protecting the environment and actually being part of seeing change happen. I went on to graduate from San Francisco State, sorry, after high school with a degree in urban studies. And in 1997, I moved to New Zealand, where I worked for Waitakere City Council, which was the first eco-city in New Zealand. I worked on a variety of sustainability and urban revitalization roles before being appointed to a really wonderful community organization called Eco Matters Environment Trust. I moved back to the States with my family in 2011 and served as executive director for the Bay Friendly Landscaping and Gardening Coalition before joining another wonderful community organization named Daily Acts in Petaluma. I was appointed to the position of the sustainability coordinator for the city of Novato, which was a brand new position at the time and my dream job in 2017. I'm serving as chair of Green Cities California currently, and I'm also chair of the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. I've also been involved on the executive steering committee of Drawdown Marin since the beginning. I'm a proud Novato resident, and I live here with my daughter, Scott and Nina.
Thanks.
I mean, my husband, Scott, my daughter, Nina.
Thanks. Walt, you're last up.
All right, so I chair the Climate Action Committee for the town of Fairfax. We were created by the town council to basically develop and implement our climate action plan. And so I've been serving on the committee for 3 or 4 years, and I took over as chair last year, and I'm very honored to be able to serve in this way.
Thank you. Okay, so let's ask our first question for our panelists, and we'll go one by one. So the first question is, what are the priorities that are outlined in your town's climate action plan? And what are a few of the more impactful things that your town has accomplished or is currently working on? Maybe if you could take each about 4 minutes maximum to sort of highlight some of the things you're most proud of. David.
Sure. So Sausalito is unique in that we have a waterfront, and we also are unique in that we have a ferry terminal, and that we're a tourist destination with a very large city linked by a very large bridge. And so we have unique attributes that create levels of complications when it comes to our community and our tourism and our commuters. So within the context of the Sausalito Sustainability Commission, our role is to advise our city council how to work within these particular constraints. We seek in our mission to advise around critical priorities that have to do with sustainability, equity, and resilience. But we're not only dealing with residents, we're dealing with business, we're dealing with these other factors that add complexity to our solution sets. We're also dealing with a waterfront and have just initiated a sea level rise effort, because we know that sea level rise will be a major issue here in Sausalito. Our critical infrastructure is co-located next to the waterfront, and many of our businesses are co-located next to the waterfront. So we do see significant challenges when it comes to that particular need for mitigation and or solutions that will provide for a better experience in Sausalito. We have a community action plan, which was adopted many years ago, that deals with the primary relationship of these recommendations to our general plan. And they cover the areas that you would expect. They cover water conservation, energy conservation, waste and recycling, our transportation systems, our bus systems, our ferry, alternatives transportation, in other words, electric vehicles, electric buses. We also have pedestrian and bicycle implications, because many of you may have been in Sausalito and see the amount of impact that we get from the recreational cyclist and also the tourist cyclist, in addition to commuter cyclists. So we have a bike master plan that's inside of our particular community action plan, in addition to our pedestrian trails and paths program. So it's a lot. We also have, in addition to that menu, we have our LEAP, which is our low emission action plan. And that is a additional action plan, which is really around the emissions that we produce as a community. And that's to meet or exceed the California statewide goals of reducing emissions 40% below 2005 standards by 2030. So we have a dedication to the LEAP model in addition to our general plan. Our role is purely advisory. In other words, we are commissioned by the city council to work through all of these issues and provide recommendations to either adopt into a general plan or create other strategies with which the community can benefit from these particular objectives. We provide specific target ways with which to do this. And then we write policy so that that policy can be adopted through the city mechanisms into the general plan or in some sort of permitting or other types of frameworks within the city context, which is benefit to the three categories of use: the residents, the commuters, and the businesses, or tourism. So that is our role. That's what we're doing. And as a community, our challenges are significant because of the nature of our use cases, and in addition to our proximity to the Bay.
Thanks, David. Sue, can you highlight some of the things you're doing in San Anselmo?
Sure. Well, we have a climate action plan, climate emergency declaration, and we are tracking emission reductions. But since we are not exactly on track to meet our current goals, let alone declare new aggressive goals, we are working on a variety of projects to reduce emissions. And we know that 55% of our emissions come from transportation, 33% from buildings, and that plastic and food waste contribute significantly as well. In the 2019 Climate Action Plan, we laid out the following areas to target: transportation, which would provide 40% of potential reductions; energy efficiency, that would be 21%; renewable energy would be 27%; waste reduction 13%; and water conservation, sequestration, and community and education and engagement would contribute as well. So we're currently taking many different approaches to meet these goals. And we have focused on ordinances. In 2019, the commission wrote and the town passed a ban on single-use plastics. And it has since become a model the county is using to write their own ban. In September of this year, the town just adopted a ban on gas leaf blowers that takes effect on January 1st of next year. And it includes rebates to help purchase electric leaf blowers, and also puts the financial burden on the homeowner and not the landscaper, in case of a fine for a violation. And we are working now on an ordinance to ban natural gas in new and potentially in remodeling buildings. Other commission actions include the Green Building Code adopted in September of 2020 that exceeds the California code. Other commission actions include a 2019 electric vehicle strategy that increased EV adoption from 3% to 12% in 3 years. And then on February 14th, the town adopted a climate emergency resolution that the commission wrote. We're also considering policies to electrify our town fleets. We want to put warning stickers on gas pumps that warn about the dangers of CO2 emissions, and we want to ban on new gas stations. And then in conjunction with Fairfax, we've created a sustainability coordinator position, and due to Vice Mayor Alexis Feynman's considerable work on this and Town Manager Dave Donnery's support, the position's funded, the job description is written, and the employee search has begun. So we're excited about that. This coming spring, we're going to participate in a public informational campaign led by Ride and Drive Clean to amplify and accelerate consumers to replace their gas-powered car with an electric vehicle. And we're excited because we've also partnered with Electrify America to bring a DC fast charging station to the Red Hill Shopping Center in San Anselmo. And this connection to Electrify America was brought about by our participation in the Marin electric vehicle squad. So it really does take a village. We recently revised our website to provide an information hub for residents to learn about the climate crisis and actions they can take to become part of the solution. Post-COVID, we're getting ready to implement the ban on single-use plastics. And in that vein, we're reaching out to restaurants about using a new reusable container service called Dispatch Goods. We've started a new monthly public outreach campaign called Climate Conversations to talk to residents about their concerns and ideas. And we just set up a table in front of the town hall so residents can stop by and get, informational flyers and pick up climate friendly items like the drought buckets supplied by Marin Water. We must do more, however, as our emission goals, reduction goals have stalled. Though community emissions are down 30% from 2005, they have declined just 1.4% in the past year. From 2017 to 2019, our emissions flatlined. The bottom line is San Anselmo has to do more. But I have no doubt that our community will rise to this challenge. We have a motivated public, a supportive town council, and a dedicated public works and planning department, and a commission that is really focused on the solutions. So thanks.
Great stuff, Sue. Thank you. Gretchen, what's up in Novato?
So the city of Novato adopted our climate action plan many years ago in 2009. And at that time, the plan outlined strategies to achieve greenhouse gas reductions, a target of 15% below 2005 emission levels by the year 2020, and a 2035 goal of 40% below 2005 levels. The good news is that as of 2019, the city achieved a 27% greenhouse gas reduction role. But as Sue mentioned, we have not made huge progress in certain areas, and there's a lot more work to do. And the wins that we have made have been relatively easy. MCE Clean Energy has been an amazing organization to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions through cleaner electricity. Vehicles have gotten a lot cleaner. There have been state mandates that have been coming down that have helped contribute to that, that 27% greenhouse gas reduction in Novato. So our climate action plan was organized around 8 priority impact areas with a set of 28 specific programs, strategies, and greenhouse gas reduction measures. I think it's important to also just note that because we are the city of Novato is part of MCEP, a number of the jurisdictions have similar climate action plans and similar programs and goals. And so there is opportunity for us to, I believe, work more collaboratively on some of the key priority areas that, that we're all working towards. So as part of the city's general plan update, which started in 2013, a decision was made to incorporate our climate action plan and the 28 original reduction measures from the 2009 cap into the general plan. So sustainability and climate is actually woven all throughout our general plan. Part of the challenge for us now is that we want to update some of our climate action goals, and so we're going to need to do a general plan amendment to make that happen. But we are looking at opportunities to do that. In terms of our priorities, the city's priorities are very similar to what they were in 2009. I mean, we know what the problems are and we know what the solutions are. These are around the built environment, really increasing renewable energy, making smarter decisions about green building and design, and really addressing the issue of transportation. So because the built environment and transportation account for 90% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Novato, these are the primary focus areas for my work for the foreseeable future. So just really quickly, during my time with the city, I have developed a number of programs aimed at increasing awareness around the climate crisis, and I've offered a series of workshops and trainings for our residents. What I'm really focusing on now within my role is leveraging the existing opportunities rather than reinventing the wheel. How can we work more closely with other communities, either in Marin County or even throughout the Bay, to get on the same page? Over this past year, COVID was a really big challenge, obviously, for all of us. It hit our budget really hard in Novato. And so I turned my focus into focusing on our internal operations, including introducing electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles into our police fleet, and developing policies and programs to reduce emissions, water use, and waste generation as a result of our day-to-day operations in the city. One of the really cool projects that I did work on across this COVID period was implementing a CalRecycle funded countywide grant to work with Extra Food, which is a food recovery organization. The grant enabled them to purchase a refrigerated van that their volunteers can use. And so reducing food waste and supporting the implementation of Senate Bill 1383, which has to do with organic waste and food recovery, is also going to be a big focus of mine across these next couple of years.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Yep.
Okay, Walt, let's bring it home. What's Fairfax been up to?
Well, so we had a climate action plan that was developed in about 2014 that aimed at a certain reduction, 20%, I think, by 2020. And we beat that by 2016 and are trying to build on that momentum as we move forward. Our town council about 2 years ago passed a climate emergency resolution, putting us on a track to achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. We had actually, as a climate action committee, recommended something more in line with IPCC recommendations. And we were looking at a 50% or some more modest reduction, but the town said, no, we want to go to zero. So our job as the Climate Action Committee is to figure out, with no staff, no budget, and no authority, how are we going to do that? And so it's been, it's been an interesting challenge. And we have the same, of course, profile, I think, as the other towns, where our big challenges are transportation and buildings. And so we've really worked hard to focus ourselves on those particular topics. And so we enacted the first all-electric building code in the state of California, not in the state of California, in Marin County. We're now looking at existing buildings and how do we start to move towards electrification there. We had a grant at one point, which we used to help encourage our people to move on to deep green for MCE. That has put us as now, I think we're the town with the highest uptake in MCE's deep green. But that's only like 9 or 10%. So it's not much to crow about, right? And so we're certainly wanting to improve that and push forward as we electrify the buildings. We are looking at how we can use some of the ARPA funding to support some of these initiatives. We just adopted a new climate action plan at the beginning of this year. And it was interesting because during the public comment period, we got a lot of people from our town who said things like, I'm a retired person. I'm on a fixed income. I want to do some of this, but I don't have the resources. So how do I do it? And one of the great things about ARPA, one of the targeted uses and the specifically enumerated uses for ARPA money is to help low and moderate income people with weatherization and other energy programs. And so we're looking right now at how we could use some of the money to help with those things, which help us with both our social justice as well as our climate aspirations and really helping the people of our town. So we're looking at that. We are looking certainly at transportation and how do we work on the transportation issues. And we're looking at ways, of course, to reduce vehicle miles traveled, VMTs, through various programs, including many of the same kinds of things that other folks are doing, as well as helping people shift towards zero emissions vehicles. I actually drive a fuel cell car, not an EV. There's a lot of controversy around hydrogen, which we could spend hours talking about. But anyway, really helping the residents to move towards zero emission vehicles. And like others, we're putting a strong emphasis on walking the talk. We really want our town operations to get to carbon neutral before everybody else does. I'd like to tell our people, how can we possibly look our town residents in the face and say, you should do it when we're not willing to do it first? And so we're really trying to do that. And in some ways, not just to set the example, but also to use it as a way of educating. So the next stove we buy is going to be an induction stove, right? So we can show people it's not so scary. So we've got all kinds of things we're doing, and I'm out of my 4 minutes, so I'm going to stop.
Thanks. Thank you all for being brief. This is really helpful. So let's pivot for a second. I know David mentioned Sausalito having to face sea level rise, but quickly, what is your town doing to focus on resilience? Whether it be wildfires, sea level rise, excess heat, et cetera. David?
Yeah, we're making recommendations based on the predictive sort of attributes that we know. And when we come to resilience, one of our main themes that we're working on and our subcommittees, particularly in transportation and electrification, are very focused on those two models. As we see our community become more actively interested in EV transportation, whether it be electric ferry, which is something that's been talked about, but a lot of commuters drive EV cars. Many tourists come into the community with EV cars, and many of our residents have EV cars. And we have a unique scenario here where we have an older infrastructure. We have an infrastructure that was put in over multiple generations. And we also have a density ratio here where we have many buildings that are multi-use. They're either commercial, multifamily, or they might be duplex or condo or some version of a townhouse. And so it's not particularly easy just to put in a EV mandate, which is we have charging. So as a community, we're very involved in public-private use cases around EV chargers. And that becomes a very challenging topic, which is, well, what kind of charger? Are they fast chargers? Is it a community service? Is it a revenue model? Is it a hybrid of those two things? Where do we locate them? Do we take away from regular parking? So these issues become extremely complicated extremely quickly. However, we do see this as a resilience mandate, because if we have more EV use cases and we have grid instability, then people can't utilize those for their transportation needs. Therefore, we need a sustainable or a resilient model that includes battery, that includes solar battery type compositions or sort of use cases around vendors or other types of technology solutions that are resilient against PG&E saying you're not going to have any power for a week. So these are the types of sort of subcommittee topics that we're making recommendations around. We're working with Marin County in general around air quality initiatives, solar delivery, the different incentive programs that are out there to pay for chargers and do studies. And this is not an easy task because of the way that Sausalito is physically organized. Its infrastructure is physically organized, and the type of uses that we see on a daily basis in this particular community. The other area that we're very focused on is in emissions. I mentioned the LEAP program earlier. And one of the mandates that we're working with in a subcommittee is writing policy or writing permitting requirements around electrification. And that includes no gas. And part of the analysis that we've done and part of the code that we're hoping to have adopted into our building and planning codes are, at a certain point, a reconstruction or a new construction will be required 100% electric. And we're looking at other communities for advice on that. There are other communities that have converted into a full electric, and we're looking to that as a attribute of our city planning and our building codes. In addition, water. I mentioned earlier, we just now crafted a subcommittee around sea level rise. And then we've also crafted a group subcommittee around water conservation. I happen to be that person. So, and we're working with other communities in the area that are part of the Marin district with conservation in mind, and how Sausalito as a community can initiate conservation strategies that are both commercial and residential. And we're working with Fairfax and others in that particular effort as well. And this is a new subcommittee that we just initiated 2 meetings ago. So those are our primary objectives.
Thanks, David. Sue, what's San Anselmo doing about resilience?
Well, I don't know. As you know, we flood, and we came the last rain event. I mean, it was like an inch under a lot of the businesses. So it was really scary. And so we have to prepare for more extreme weather events like that. I mean, we know there's going to be massive rainfall like it's happening in British Columbia right now. And so but the town flood plan has been ongoing for years. There was a setback because Ross had a permitting issue, and they're part of, they're downstream from us. So they had to do theirs first. So ours got delayed, by a year as well, but that is gonna start again in this spring. So, we knocked down a building. They're going to be really working on that, because we are really at risk of just the whole downtown flooding from these extreme weather events. And the real concern I have too is extreme heat events. So, in Louisiana, in the hurricane, people didn't die from the winds. They died from the heat and the no power that existed for weeks. It completely took out their power system. Some of people in Louisiana are still without power. So my concern is, and what I'm focusing on with Karen Mendelov, who's also on the commission, is getting a resiliency hub. So solar powered with backup batteries, And, someplace people can go to cool off during these heat events that we know are coming. And I feel like, a lot of residents don't have air conditioning. We have a lot of older residents, and that it's going to be really important to do that. And the town, is replacing the roof on their building, and it's also going to look into the ARPA funds for solar and battery backup. But all these things just take a lot of money. And so the rescue plan, is going to come in really handy, and hopefully that will happen now.
Great. Gretchen, Novato and resilience efforts?
So this is an area that that we need to do more work. We've really been primarily focused on fuel reduction and flood control measures. But similar to what Sue said, with extreme weather events and heat events and PS events, we've actually we've turned our Margaret Todd Senior Center into a resilience hub of sorts. So people can go there and cool off and charge their phones. And I'm really interested in looking at how we can grow that to become more of a proper hub. We are going to be updating our general plan safety element to address climate adaptation in 22-23, I believe. And at that point, we also will be looking at potentially updating our climate action goals and strategies to give effect to those adaptation policies and objectives. But this is definitely an area that needs more work, and that I'm really excited to work with our community on coming up with solutions to be more resilient.
Great. Walt, anything to add for Fairfax?
The thing I would say is we are very focused on mitigation and not adaptation. That is our mandate from the town. And so it's not really our jurisdiction to think about it, but many of the things that you do to mitigate your environmental footprint have the co-benefit, if you will, of building resilience. And so we're in particular looking for those ways of overlapping and many of the same kinds of things that other folks have noted.
Great. So I think we're doing great time-wise. One more issue, we sort of touched on this a bit, but the third question is, what are the biggest challenges or roadblocks your community is facing in meeting its CAP goals? So we've kind of touched on, some collaboration issues possibly, Fairfax and San Anselmo are looking to create additional staff support for their commissions, maybe politics. What do you think might be holding us back? David.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I have to say, it's money. It's money. And it's money. And I don't say that very lightly. Many of these programs are very expensive. They're both expensive for cities to implement their infrastructure, and infrastructure is expensive. There are regulatory and partnership agreements. It seems very simple to put in an EV charger, which is a public use. However, the backstory behind that simple task is monumental. The P's, the public, the liabilities, the insurance, the vendors that monitor and manage the system, the revenue models around it. I can go on and on and on. And that's just one charger. And then you start looking at multiple use cases at multiple locations, public, privates. It gets very, very expensive very quickly. And so there are limitations in terms of how quickly those can deploy. And they have to move through the government machine, and the government machine moves at its own pace. In addition, many of the topics we've talked about today, sea level rise, that is critical infrastructure. That's sewers and drains and raising streets and all the other sort of factors around that, which is remarkably costly and also fits into a general plan. It fits into transportation. It fits into all of the sort of critical infrastructure that a city relies on, which in many cases is very old and needs to be updated in addition to all the other factors with respect to the mitigations. So these factors around money, and there are great organizations that provide funding, but that funding is rarely enough. and a city's ability to then spend down its budget, which very rarely is enough, and then the staff coordination and the expert advice and consultants that come into actually doing the recommendations. And then lastly, the get it done model, the contractors and so forth, and the disruptions that occur in terms of installing all of this critical infrastructure management and mitigation against these different risks. So I'd say that those are the big buckets of challenge. Now we're, as a Sausalito Sustainability Commission, we're making recommendations, we're providing resources and insights so the city council can make good decisions around which way it wants to go with these. We're partnering with other cities, like on this particular panel, and we're working with state and local government to try and find other advisory models that have worked. For example, we had a conversation as a city with the city of Berkeley, because they did a very extensive pilot around public use cases of EVs, and we learned from that. It wasn't particularly rosy, their outcome. So then we learned from why it wasn't rosy. So I think those are the real impediments. And at the end of the day, it's really difficult. And this is difficult for sustainability commissions or commissions that are public volunteers that really get deep in these topics and do it as a volunteer. It's difficult for cities that have limited employees and they're stretched thin and their budgets are very narrow to even contemplate the complexity of these particular applications of resiliency and technology and ultimately plan ahead 10, 20, 30, 50 years. So those are the impediments. The good story is that as we've witnessed on this phone call, many of these, this Zoom call, many of these panelists in their communities are making progress, given all of these sort of limitations, which it shows you how resourceful we all are. And we're making big progress also with respect to the small things, the waste management awareness, the community, commercial businesses adapting to the different sort of water conservation and packaging modifications around sort of their waste, food waste, and so forth. So, people do what they can do, and the city makes small sort of meaningful strides where it can do that with its limitations and its resources. So I hope that helps give some scope.
It does.
Yeah, city government's tough, and community government's tough, and state government's tough because it's very costly.
Right. Well, we will see the new infrastructure funds, how far those trickle down to the local. Sue, Sue, any observations from your perspective, Sue?
Right. Well, I would agree, it's money, but really our town government is only 1% of our emissions. So and we need to reach our residents. So, and one thing I think, we need to get information out about the Electrify Marin rebates for, a heat pump and an electric water heater, Bayren, which I knew nothing about when I was looking into, electrifying my home. And they can, they have contractors rebates. They'll come to your home and do energy efficiency evaluation. So there's lots of help out there. And, I was also, I made a lot of mistakes in things I did to try and reduce my emissions at home. I put solar panels on, which is great, but it doesn't really reduce my emissions because I have deep green from MCE. So I wish I had taken that money and used it for an electric water heater or a heat pump to replace my 25-year-old gas furnace. So I think giving people information, like now I know that replacing your gas water heater really reduces your emissions more than a heat pump does. So and I even went on Twitter and I asked Mark Jacobson, who's a climate engineer from Stanford, who's very available on Twitter, and he sort of put a list of how a homeowner should go about, what they should do first in terms of getting your greatest emission reductions for the money you have, because I have limited funds and there's all these things I want to do. So anyway, I think long story short, it would be really helpful to give people a list. Here's what you should do first. Here's where you should put your money first. And I think, I'm so involved with transportation because driving an electric vehicle is the single most important thing you can do to reduce your emissions. I mean, we want to use public transportation. You know, we want to walk and bike, but the truth is in Marin County, there is not a lot of good public transportation. People aren't using it. They're in their cars. So if we can get people in electric vehicles powered with clean energy, we're going to be doing a lot to lower emissions.
And I know, Walt, you've got a hard stop at 11. So let me turn to you real quick and then I'll come back to Gretchen.
I do, I apologize. And by the way, I gave Sue a similar list. And I was going to post mine. We have a little blog on our website, so I'll post mine as well. You know, I would say, I think the biggest barrier, frankly, is a shared sense of appropriate urgency, right? I mean, the science here is very clear. And this is not a political question in that nature isn't going to negotiate with us, right? Physics are physics. And, you know, if we do not act with sufficient speed, we will not accomplish what we need to. And I think that getting people aligned around the urgency, I think is the biggest single problem. I think if we could solve that, the money would follow, everything else would follow. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Gretchen, wrap this up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to echo what Walt says, and as someone who's worked in the nonprofit sector and now working in government, you know, things in government move really slowly. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, and this is a big problem that we all need to solve together. And so I think finding, you know, I would love to see more collaboration amongst the nonprofit organizations and the public agencies in Marin. And, you know, we try to do that through MCEP. We don't always do it well. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Drawdown Marin as they're looking to transition to become a nonprofit. You know, I think for me, some of the biggest challenges that we're facing in Novato is that a lot of our buildings are already built. And so while we can regulate the new, you know, fireman's fund or hotel, you know, whatever is coming down the line, we may be able to influence that more. We've got a lot of stock that's already built. And so we need to come up with ways to support our existing building owners to make their buildings more efficient and rise to the challenge.
Thank you. Well, that was great discussion. We're really short on time for questions, but we don't have a lot of questions. Let me jump into those from the chat. And maybe I'll take this first one, being a former planning director. How do each of the city's caps influence your city's land use planning and project approvals? I guess I would offer up that I think almost all the cities in Marin, you know, in terms of land use, are trying to, you know, increase density and mixed use near transit in terms of land use, not putting a lot of new development in neighborhoods that are far flung. And each of the cities, you know, has adopted the Cal Green building codes, so new buildings that are built are more energy efficient. Again, we've talked about that doesn't really get at 90% of the existing stock that's out there very well. And we have electrification ordinances that are coming, again, mostly dealing with new and large additions. And I would also say that sea level rise, I don't think has really impacted a great deal of our land use planning yet. We don't know enough yet. And also many of our areas that are subject to sea level rise are already developed. So, you know, not going there really isn't an option now. It's how do we protect what we have going into the future. Anyone else want to talk about land use planning? Okay, if not, question is, does putting food waste in my green can help or hurt the environment? Anyone want to?
I'd love to answer that.
Oh, go ahead, Gretchen.
No, I was just going to say, we've got to put our food waste in our green bin. First of all, we have to reduce food waste in the first place. So buy only what you need. And if you have a compost on your property, that's a great way. It reduces the transportation of that food waste, but we've got to get people using their green bins more.
And home composting.
And home composting, yep.
Let's see, question about people that aren't here. Corte Madera, Mill Valley, Kentville, Larkspur. In terms of work, we've been discussing how much energy and focus is there in Marin to multiply our results by working together. And I think that's what we were talking about. You know, I think the MCEP does a good job of trying to, you know, corral all the various cities. But as we've said, only 3 of our jurisdictions actually have paid staff. So it's a bit of catch as catch can. But the structure is there, and as Gretchen said, we are all pretty much sharing the same types of programs to implement. This isn't brain surgery. We know what we need to do. So to the extent that we can collaborate on rolling out some of these programs, I think the better. Other comments about that kind of collaboration, particularly for the smaller cities?
Well, I would just say, Alex Portashaw with Drawdown is leading all county groups. Once a month we meet, and that is just starting. And I think that's an exciting way for all of us to participate on, Marin County as a whole.
Right. It would be good, I think, to use Drawdown as sort of an organizing principle for a lot of our work.
Yeah.
Well, Sue, people are asking you to post that list of incremental improvements to a
Okay.
home. That there's a
Right.
lot
I've
of-
been
lot of
trying to
interest.
post it in the chat, and it's not letting me, but I don't know if.
Sue, I'll get in touch with you and get that information. And
Okay.
I'll include it in a follow-up.
Okay.
But we'll
sounds
make
fine.
sure that the information's available.
One last question came in, Gretchen, I think you'll know this. The Drawdown group, is that available for public to attend these meetings, or what is the status in terms of public
Yeah.
involvement?
Yeah, so the steering group meetings are open to the public, and they're posted, those steering group meetings, meeting dates and times are posted on the County of Marin's website.
Great. Well, Nancy, I think we've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully it met your objectives.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, David, Gretchen, Sue. Walt had to leave. He had another appointment, but all of you, a lot of work goes on in the background to put these together. And I really appreciate you all giving your time to do this. Again, because this is recorded, hopefully more people will be able to benefit from your conversation. And of course, there's always opportunities for follow-up. Sue, we'll get that list from you. We can also the Drawdown schedule, we can follow up with that for people if they're interested in attending some of those meetings. Sue, Gretchen, are they still doing those on Zoom, or are they in person?
MCEP meetings?
The Drawdown.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, no, they're on Zoom.
Everything's on Zoom. So
Yes,
that
everything's
makes
on
it
Zoom.
somewhat more,
Yeah.
I think, accessible for people to just pop in on Zoom. So I encourage everybody to do more. We did have Alex's presentation on Drawdown Marin. It was just when they'd been made a nonprofit, and now they're in the process of transitioning over. That recording is on our YouTube channel. I can't remember which number it is, but it is well labeled under the climate change playlist. And we will, again, I believe in the chat, we have the link to the recordings for you to see those. Okay, again, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. And you've given us enough of your time. So happy to say goodbye, Bob. Thank you again. Next, let me get back to my script here. So with that, what's in store for climate change in the Marin League for 2022? All of you have been great supporting us through the year with this climate change speaker series, and I hope it does live on in the recordings. This is the final installment of the climate change speaker series. And as I mentioned, the link to all of the recordings, Lynn's putting that in the chat. We will not have a meeting in December. And effective first of the year, Linda and I are stepping down as co-chairs. So if anyone is interested in taking over the leadership of this committee, please let us know. My contact information is in the chat. And if you're interested in seeing this committee continue, please let us know. I'm going to be wrapped up with candidate forums next year for the primary and the general election. So I just can't do it all. So I'm sorry about that. But that doesn't mean climate change is going away by any means for the League in 2022. We will continue to be involved in climate change related issues. And with that, I'm going to toss this over to Anne. She's going to tell you a little bit more about what's in store. Anne?
First of all, I just want to thank Nancy and Linda for this wonderful, wonderful climate change education journey that we have been on during this last year. I have learned so much, and I just so appreciate the wonderful programs you've brought to us. It's just been outstanding, truly outstanding. I understand that you need to step down, but it makes me sad, of course. But you know, the climate change is still gonna be a part of our mission. It has to be. So hopefully someone will decide to take over as chair. If not, we'll work it in. We'll find a way to work it in. We have right now a plan, I believe, for March, I think. Monday member meeting, is it March that we decided on, Nancy?
For resilient neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Yes, that's tentative, but that is a tentative plan right now.
A tentative plan for having a climate change focus Monday member meeting. Another thing that we're going to be doing, and this is more immediate, Measure A, the Parks and Open Space sales tax is coming up for renewal on the June ballot. And this is a very complicated measure. It's going to be very controversial, and we really want to understand it better and know how and what we as a league want to think about and support. So we're going to start a little, it could be big, Measure A study group. And so anyone interested in being a part of that study group, please let me know, or Nancy, or both of us know your interest. We're hoping to have in January our Monday member meeting focused on Measure A. Now, and then Lynn just put in the chat a link to the Marin County Parks website that talks about Measure A, what it has been, and the proposal for what it will be. But I can tell you this is going to be very controversial. It's going to be a lot of, you may have seen in the IJ this morning, a very thorough article about Measure A. Check your IJ. It's really quite interesting. So that's what's going to happen going forward so far. As I say, I hope we can continue this committee, but if we can't, climate change is not, as Nancy said, going away. It's going to be with us, and it's going to just, it's going to be more and more with us, I'm afraid. So it's something the league is very interested in continuing to be a part of the solution if we can be. So Nancy?
Okay, I am going to make my own personal comment about climate change. Oh, am I muted? No. In that I'm with Walt on this is where I get teary, the lack of urgency in addressing the issues around climate change, particularly on the higher policy making level, nationally and globally, internationally, just breaks my heart. And at the same time, as we sit here and we wonder, what can I do? What can I do? You can only do so much. And it's going to take a long time to turn this around. But I know for me, the small things that I can do, I'm trying my best. I drive an electric vehicle. I love my electric vehicle. I highly recommend them to anybody. It's just trying to not have that sense of doom and gloom, because it isn't all doom and gloom. There are amazing opportunities out there working on these issues. If nothing else, through the people you meet and the relationships you gain. It's been a game changer for me since 2009, before which I didn't have an environmental bone in my body. And the people in my life are all the people that I have met since then through the Environmental Forum of Marin, the League of Women Voters. It has just been life-changing. So I just want to, I guess, close this with a voice of hope and optimism that this is a challenge we can meet. I know we can. We just have to be willing to do it. And it needs to be done now, not in the future. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for this series this year. I really appreciate it. And we'll see where things go next year. Anne, thank you so much.